I came across this guy, Alex Hexagon. I don't know why, but I've been on my feed. I've been getting a lot of very weird conservative leaning propaganda, and I came across his video why the 2020s are the opposite of the 60s, and so then I was like, huh, this guy has a lot of weird takes that are not factually backed up, and but he presents things in a very clean, very visual, snappy way. It looks very good, great production, dude. But I was like just amazing stuff. But he has this video that he's called "Atheism is a Religion," and I was like, I'm interested in the topic of different viewpoints. I myself, yeah, I guess you could say I'm a theistic leaning agnostic. Um, but I was like, I'm kind of skeptical of the idea of atheism as a religion. So I thought I'd watch it. And then I watched it, and I have a lot of things I'd like to pick apart in it, in his logic and what he represents. And I figured people should, you know, hear a different side and know where this guy's wrong and that where he's misleading you and manipulating you. He's a good writer, very good rhetoric, really good logician, but he's great at manipulating facts and ideas. So I figured we'd watch this video at the same time, and then I respond live to the problems in his video. So here we go.
A very simple question. What is your religion? And the results of that were very interesting indeed. 39% of responders identified as Christians, followed not too far behind by the 22% who identified as atheists. 17% said that they were spiritual, but not necessarily ascribing to any organized religion. 9% identified as Muslim, alongside 9% of pagans, with a mere 4% identifying as Hindus.
Now,
if we break this down to its raw relevance, what this means is that 78% of respondents identified as theists, meaning that they believed in some sort of spirituality, whereas 22% of respondents identified as atheists, who...
So, why is he even bringing this up? And to woo Pete, I'm not that Ezekiel. But why is he using this graph? The reason he's using this graph is to appeal to popular opinion. Say, oh, because a lot of people believe in this, therefore it's more natural for humans to be religious, which he's going to try to bring up later. And he's trying to show that, oh, he's appealing to nature, essentially, right now. He's trying to use a graph to show people that, oh, no, religion's the default. So here we go.
Such notions entirely.
I'm not even an atheist.
It's this 22% of you,
and I think this is stupid.
Today. But why? What's so bad about atheism? Well, in my view, atheism is one of the most damaging ideologies of the modern era.
And boom, there shows right there, Alex, that shows your bias. You can't actually come to an actual, true, objective conclusion because you do hold such a, hardcore belief. Your idea that atheism is a religion has nothing to do with atheism itself. It has to do with, boom, your bias right there. Your point of view already informs the fact of your conclusion, and you just work backwards from there.
Responsible for so many of the problems we collectively face today that I honestly can't believe it isn't talked about more.
And he doesn't even bring up any proof of that claim. He makes the claim that atheism is extremely problematic and that he believes it is the worst thing to happen to the modern age, or something to that effect. Provides no proof of that. Cites no articles, makes no statements about why that is true.
People who are grounded wholeheartedly in reality, which is an assessment that I, for the most part, actually tend to agree with. The reality is that faith in the divine is called belief for a reason, because none of us, at least at this stage in mankind's development, really knows for sure how our universe actually operates. and as such, debating something we cannot prove or disprove will pretty much always be a fruitless endeavour. Therefore, I'm not going to make any spiritual arguments here. Instead, I'm going to focus on what it is that atheists claim to care about, and that is something we can all agree actually exists. Reality. The number one reason why you shouldn't be an atheist can honestly be summarized in a single sentence. Religion is inherent to the human condition.
And this is the point that he's going to try to prove with a lot of faulty... yeah, exactly. I've never seen an atheist start a war for no God. Exactly. Why he believes that theism is the default, and he's going to prove that through, I don't know really what, because he doesn't actually truly prove anything. He just makes a bunch of statements that without backing them up with any evidence or even logic, true logic.
What the hell
He's a great rhetorician.
There's this bizarre idea we have in the modern world that atheism is the default mode of mankind, and that religion is this artificial intervention that overtakes our natural logic, forcing us to act irrationally as such.
And so to point out another thing, he never defines what is religion. Because to do that, I believe the way that he represents religion, at least in this, he has a very Hellenistic view, a very Western view, more Greek gods are kind of anthropomorphized version view of spirituality. Not every religion necessarily contains gods, or what we call a religion really even has theistic elements. There's some that can be atheistic religions. So he doesn't never talks about that either.
But this really couldn't be further from the truth. Judging from history, it is extremely rare for someone to be an atheist.
Not true. So, in Rome, the Christians were considered atheists because they didn't believe in the Roman gods or anything at all. They believed in some kind of weird invisible force. So a lot of Romans were like, oh, you guys are atheists. Oh, also, there's a lot of other cults and things that... Oh, actually... That's not true. I believe you could call Democritus one of the first atheists, because if I remember correctly, he thought everything was born of chaos and was basically made up of atoms, which were little tiny triangles that could fit together and made up all the elements of the world. So, boom, right there, Alex, you are fucking wrong.
Well, seems like a rule for us to be naturally religious. But why?
Not true.
Well, from a biological perspective, us humans really aren't that great in many ways. We aren't as strong as the orangutan, we aren't as fast as the cheetah, we can't
and here,
like the fish,
he goes on to actually prove why a lot of people are atheist or agnostic, because of us being faulty humans.
Like the bird. But we do have one major asset going for us, and that is our brains. Our unrivaled intelligence is what catapulted humans into becoming by far the most dominant species on our planet. And one factor of such intelligence is our...
No, humans have cult-like tendencies. Atheism doesn't.
When it comes to recognizing patterns and shapes. For example, this is a video of a door in my house, and as you can see, it's a very ancient wooden door that is in dire need of replacement, with numerous scratches and blotches all over it from decades worth of use. And oh look, what's this? A seahorse. Come on, you see it too, right? As humans, it is deeply hardwired into us to conjure such artificial patterns and shapes.
He's talking about the phenomenon known as apophenia. I have a whole fucking painting about that. It's the seeing shapes and determining meaning from random objects because they look similar to the patterns that represent the actual things. It happens a lot. It's like when you see a face in the clouds, or a bunny or something like that. But that's another reason why we believe in a God, because we misappropriate these patterns and signs, and then we think of it as being as having intelligent agency, when it's really just coincidence.
Even if they aren't necessarily there. Before the dawn of cars and electricity, there was borderline zero light pollution in the sky, and as such, our ancestors could easily see the stars and the wider vastness of space with much more clarity than we do now. And what is it they did with such a vista? They, of course, notice patterns. Some stars, when interlinked together, form shapes that we today call constellations, and from that spawned the concept of star signs and other mythical elements. Despite the immense differences between us humans around the world, there is one universal observation that remains true, no matter what your culture, continent, or country is, and that's that at some point in time, your ancestors were almost guaranteed.
Appeal to tradition. Because someone else did it, therefore that is the right thing. That's not because your ancestors were doing it and everybody else was doing the same stuff means that you should. That's not necessary. Not necessarily true. It's not always the case.
Religious, in one way.
So that's a fallacy.
Indeed, every place on
Or
Earth
a claim.
has independently spawned
Not a
their own
fallacy, sorry.
deities and religious
Bad
systems
claim.
of belief. Europe, Africa, the Americans, Asia, Oceania, Antarctica. Oh, well, maybe not Antarctica, but you get the point. The idea that religion is this artificial construct, as opposed to one that naturally ferments, considering just how dominant it has been throughout the human history thus far, is a baffling declaration, all things considered.
As I stated earlier, religion is an umbrella term for a lot of different belief systems. Not all of them equate to the same thing. So you can't just because it's like saying it's essentially what racism is about. It's like lumping everybody together. It's like, oh, you have brown skin, therefore you're like all the other brown skin people. That's part of being racist, being prejudiced, and being unable to distinguish these things. Just using an umbrella term and be like, oh, all these things are the same. No, they're not. We're all individuals. Religions aren't the same. Not even within their own religions. There's tons of splintered off sects that believe completely different things.
Now, whether or not it's natural because there is a divine being who made us that way, or whether it's some form of creative mental defense to rationalize our existence in a way that we can comprehend, despite my leanings, I won't pretend to be certain. But the fact is that humans are clearly naturally hardwired to be religious, at least in some regard, and this tends to manifest tangibly with large groups of...
Hardwired. Why does he say hardwired? Because that's an interesting word choice. Because he wants you to believe that it's baked in, that it's unescapable to be religious. That's not true. That's not a default. It's what we call religion is more of an umbrella term to lump together habitual things that people do is as more of a social group thing. The way, at least, man, it's what. Let's watch some more of this. Real quick.
A trait of ours that will always be apparent, even when we try for it not to be. And to prove this point, we only actually need to take a look at the modern atheist movement itself. Atheism started off as a movement by intellectuals who started to view the societal restrictions that the dominant...
Not true. Atheism has been around for thousands of years. There have been people that were killed for being atheists or being considered atheists. It's not a new modern movement. Yes, there is new atheism, and there is definitely a sweeping, I guess, trend towards not taking religion seriously and kind of questioning what we had been told because it doesn't line up with logic. It doesn't line up with what we observe. It doesn't line up with what we can test.
Religion of the time, Christianity, imposed as a cumbersome burden that got in the way of human progress.
It is.
Specifically, scientific progress. I'm sure almost everyone has heard the story of Galileo.
And he's gonna try to say that atheism started with Galileo,
who in the early 1600s made the accurate assessment that the Earth is in fact a globe that orbits around the Sun. As a result of this, he was placed under house arrest by his local Christian Inquisition for holding such heretical beliefs that at the time were believed to contradict the scripture of the Bible and thus required punishment. This is why the atheism movement started. So that science, aka the pursuit of tangible and observable...
No, it didn't. That's not why it started. And that's not how it started.
...could freely spring forth and blossom without such authoritarian restrictions. And as such, so...
No, it's not.
Our understanding of the universe has changed, even within my short lifetime. The best example of this has to be Pluto. When I was a child, we were taught that Pluto was the smallest planet in our solar system. But as time passed, we learned that there were in fact many tiny planets like Pluto out there, and as such, we recategorized Pluto as a mere dwarf planet instead. That is the beauty of science. It is ever-changing and always evolving. And yet today, if you look at what science is slowly devolving into, and by proxy its associate atheist movement as a whole, what you'll find is that it is becoming less about asking questions and more about pretending to know all the answers.
Not true. Yes, there are some arrogant scientists that believe, that they know everything or that they can figure everything out, but there's not that many actually. To be a scientist is to be skeptical of research, to way to, you could say, prove anything, or at least find a model that works, is to try to break it as much as possible. That's what science is. You have an idea, you try to break it, and if you can't break it, you kind of accept it as, this is a working model. Not necessarily true, but workable. That's what science is about. Finding what's workable.
More than an attempt to rationalize why we exist in a way we can tangibly understand. It thus makes sense why, when said faith is threatened, as in the case of Galileo, such believers will respond with hostility. Because that would mean that the faith is wrong, and that would mean the reason why we truly exist would be a mystery. A mystery that is an open door to existential dread and nihilism. A door that no one wants to open. But the irony is, many modern atheists, when their worldview is threatened, become just as defensive as the believers they mock. As of the time of recording, trust the science.
Okay, he's trying to use that as a point of mockery. Be like, oh, you do the same thing. Yeah, fucking everyone does that. If you believe something and then someone says that's not true, people become defensive. That's fucking normal. But he's trying to use it as though it's not normal, and as though religious people are less likely to be offended, when actually, yeah, just even if you even say to some religious people that you're an atheist, their whole fucking life, their whole way of reacting towards you changes.
A phrase that has been going around a lot lately. And personally, I find this phrase to be absolutely fascinating.
And here he's gonna...
See, I tend to write a lot.
And here he's gonna try to appeal to the fact that he's done a lot of writing. Yes, he's really good at writing. He's a great rhetorician. He's great at, manipulating words in order to try to prove a point. But here he's going to try to use that as a saying that the atheists are using trust of the science, when trust of the science has nothing to do with atheism at all. He has gone from saying that atheism is a religion to saying that science is a religion. And then now he's saying that he's going to try to prove that with some word manipulation. With the phrase that trust the science, as though that has anything to do with atheism being a religion. Because there's a lot of people that are religious that still would say, trust the science. And here he's going to go into why he thinks, or this weird...
These productions, but also numerous little stories that perhaps one day I will make public. Needless to say that the more you write, the more you will start to master the English language, and as such, gain the ability to read not just what the words in front of you say, but also to read between the lines. This phrase is a situation whereby I feel such logic applies, because when the average person looks at it, it probably doesn't seem like that much of a big deal, but it really is. And it's because of this
and
word
here,
right here,
he's gonna make a mountain out of a molehill. Watch.
Is it trust the science? Why not just trust science?
So here he asks a question. Instead of actually digging in and giving proof of where this phrase comes from, he starts his own weird kind of fantasy land of where he thinks it comes from. When before I saw trust the science, what I used to see? Trust the scientific research. People like to shorten things, so they say just trust the science. From trust the scientific research, because it's just faster to say and easier. But he's going to try to use that as a gotcha. Watch this.
If I introduce myself by saying, "Hi, I'm Alex Hexagon," you wouldn't bat an eyelid. But if I introduce myself by saying,
pure
"Hi,
sophistry
I'm
right here.
the Alex Hexagon," you'd be like, The Alex hexagon? The Alex hexagon would imply that there are in fact other Alex hexagons out there, but you can just dismiss them because I'm the real one. The exact same logic also applies here. The phrase, trust the science, is a subtle confession of competition, implying that there are other forms of science out there, but that they should be dismissed because they aren't the science. And what is the science? Well, whatever the clergy say that it is, of course. Despite the fact that, as alluded to
See,
earlier,
he's trying to equate religious authority, which is usually by committee of authorities of trying to debate on ideas of theology. He's trying to equate that with scientific consensus, which is different. That's not a bunch of people trying to converge to come together to a conclusion. That's a bunch of people making experiments, and then they bring whatever conclusions from their experiments and then put it together and see what actually happened. Has this experiment worked? Has it not worked? That's not equated with a bunch of people getting together and discussing and debating theology. Completely fucking different. Alex Hexagon, you are a great manipulator.
Is to ask questions. Now, if a member of the public shows any sort of hesitation about the reigning scientific dogma imposed on them from above, far from being congratulated for having such curiosity, they are instead hounded, shamed, and punished. In a similar fashion,
and cites no examples, just says this as though it's true. Gives no proof, just makes a statement so that way he can make the viewer, like, put a narrative in the viewer's mind to manipulate them later on. So that way they're more in line with, to believe his stuff later on.
Galileo was. Meanwhile, those who go along with what they are told without question are greatly rewarded.
And that's the essence of a lot of cults. But that's because humans have kind of a tendency to manipulate each other to get what they want. It has nothing to do with atheism or religion. It has to do with human greed. And if you look at a lot of scientific research that gets suppressed, it has to do with the fact that corporations love to suppress science that proves that what they're making is poisonous or will harm the public. That's why the tobacco industry has tons of money in research in food. They have that because they want to know what they can get people addicted to, because they know that tobacco is kind of phasing out. They started doing that in the 60s. But anyways, I digress.
Atheism has, in many ways, become a religion in of itself. It has its...
Doesn't define religion ever in this video. He never defines religion, hasn't told us what a religion is yet, and then claims that science is a religion.
Origin story. It has its own priests. It has its own congregation. Indeed, the cosmetics may be different.
He
but the
likens a school to church. Completely different things, dude. Completely different things. He gives a bunch of what is this? This is Atheism is a Religion by Alex Hexagon. And I'm pointing out all the fallacies and all the problems with, and all his manipulation that he does in this video. Because I came across his channel earlier, and then I was like, huh, interesting. Watch this, and I was like, that's not right. That's not true. That's illogical. That's manipulation.
Remains the same. It's our way or the highway. Of
Yeah.
course, atheists would cry foul at such an accusation, claiming that they prioritize truth, not myth. Yet their truth is just that, their truth. They select
their truth. So he's trying to say, I have the truth, and yours is a relative truth. No, truth is a quality of statements. We're trying to find better statements that reflect reality. There is an objective reality. And that's what people are trying to describe and find more things about reality. That's not your truth versus my truth. It's not the wishy-washy, kind of pop relativism, because it's not even true relativism. He's setting up a straw man and then knocking it down.
Facts that fall into their worldview while disregarding all evidence to the contrary.
No, that's what science is about, looking at all the evidence and then finding which stuff actually aligns what. So if the evidence goes against your idea, you get rid of your idea, you come up with a new one. In religion, if you come up with a new idea, you become burned at the stake.
In a loose coalition of free thinkers that promote intellectual freedom and diversity of thought, the modern atheist movement has instead slowly transmogrified into becoming merely an opposite mirrored form of that of which preceded it, which is, primarily in the West at least, Christianity, with the values that most atheists claim to hold ironically dictated to in reverse by that of which they claim not to value. For example, whereas Christianity believes in strict gender roles as per human nature, the modern atheist movement shuns such roles as sexist. Whereas Christianity preaches...
It's not a one-to-one equation. Just because someone rejects the idea of a God and doesn't observe that in reality, doesn't mean they reject morals. And doesn't necessarily mean that it follows that they believe the opposite. This is some more manipulation by Alex Hexagon. He's trying to lead you to believe atheism as a certain amount of qualities that it does not associate with. Just because certain people in a modern movement might have certain aligned ideas and beliefs does not mean that it follows that atheism itself is a religion or has these qualities if you call yourself an atheist, any more than if you are automatically a Christian if you say that you are a theist. I am a theist, I am not a Christian.
In regards to intercourse, the modern atheist movement views such as a mere recreational act, whereas Christianity...
Not all atheists believe that. I actually know some that are very kind of, I wouldn't call them prudish, but they're very straight-laced. They just don't necessarily, they're not Christians.
Claims that life is sacred and thus tends to oppose abortion. The modern atheist movement has branded it as a human right.
Not all atheists believe that either. Some actually are not are anti-abortionists. The issue has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with bodily autonomy.
Christianity stands for, the atheist will stand for the exact opposite.
That's not true. He's trying to... Atheism is not a reaction. It's an absence of a belief. An absence is not a rejection or a negation. It just isn't necessarily there. Whereas...
fail. And so, regardless of your personal views on said topics, what, overall, does this tell us? It tells us exactly what I said earlier.
And by using the visual of the cross and the upside-down cross, he's trying to make atheists appear evil. Because the upside-down cross has been a symbol kind of, adopted by the more dark... Even though it actually is... Peter was crucified in an upside-down cross, it's been kind of adopted by, pop culture as being, evil, and so it's in a lot of things. So he's trying to use that to equate atheism to being evil, which he already, at the very beginning, he stated he believes. So this video has nothing to do with actual proof. It's him trying to brainwash... How many people saw this? 167,000 people. This is his attempt to form his ideas in their minds without proof and just using pure sophistry and rhetoric.
That religion is inherent to the human condition. And the best way I can
Still
prove this phenomenon
hasn't proved it.
Is r/atheism. R/atheism on the website
That's not
known as
proof.
Reddit is...
Going to Reddit is not proof, bro.
Far the largest atheist forum on the internet, with millions of subscribers and tens of thousands of visitors per day. It is, however, notorious for being an absolute cringe fest. F all.
Not all atheists are on Reddit. That's so fucking stupid. There's lots of atheists that don't even have access to internet.
I don't care.
Or don't want to be on the internet.
I don't care what your invisible sky daddy says. I don't give a single F about me disrespecting your religion when it has shown nothing but disrespect towards what I stand for. I hate the Bible, and I will never agree with anyone who supports it.
Okay, and you see, okay.
Who tells me to stop talking.
So, do you see how he's using that video and using that voice to form in the mind of the viewer that atheists are just completely little bitches. You know, and making them nerds, essentially. Because that's how he views them and how he wants you to view them. Because he wants you to reject and come over to his side, which is, you know, this is Christianity is the biggest part about it is that it is a religion of trying to force your beliefs on other people and trying to get them to believe like you. Evangelizing, as they call it, is like part of the religion. If you don't evangelize, you're considered a bad. Yeah, it's just his portrayal of atheists, but he's using it as a way to brainwash people to make you think that all atheists are like this.
It's about religion. All religion. Yeah. Now, to show just how fanatical and thus...
And then self-superior religious, yeah, afterwards. To really set it in that, like, you know, if you're cool and if you want to be counterculture, you don't be a whiny atheist.
Predictable such people are, I'm going to go undercover and use all my writing and psychological credence to manufacture a post that will reach the top.
More like a psychological cretin.
Do you think I can do it? Well, let's see. Introducing Alex, the undercover atheist. Alright, first, we're going to need a new account. Let's call it Plus Size Skeptic. Genius. I must say I am baffled that name wasn't taken. There we go, Plus Size Skeptic. We're in. Alright, so, this is the post that I've
more manipulation to try to make you have a certain image of atheist in your mind.
I'm a 24-year-old woman. He's 25. I'm an atheist. He's a Christian. Everything between us personally is fine. Our difference in beliefs have never gotten in the way, until now. We've recently started talking about abortion. We've only been together for 6 months, so shockingly, we've never actually discussed the topic before. Well, as you may expect, it didn't go well. Of course, I'm pro-choice, and he's pro-life, or, as I like to call it, anti-woman. I want to ask you guys and gals, even if everything else in your relationship was fine, would you stay with someone who didn't believe in a woman's right to choose? Now, without tooting my own horn...
And then now he's trying to equate that he's trying to bring in political ideology into atheism. There are right-wing atheists, and there are left-wing atheists. It has nothing to do with political ideology or the belief of anti-abortion and being pro-abortion, because there are people that tend to believe more of those things on one side or the other, but that is not a correlative of atheism per se. Boom. Fucking play.
Of social engineering. Let me explain why. To my knowledge, Reddit is about 80% male, 20% female, and I imagine r/atheism probably has similar demographics to the site as a whole. When social engineering for the maximum effect, you're going to want to aim for the largest demographic possible, which in this case is of course going to be men. And so therefore, by pretending that the author of this post is a woman, we will naturally elicit more responses, because men tend to hold women in a higher regard, especially when they are a rarity. In addition, I've implanted an appeal for attention, guys and gals, implying a universal desire for feedback, as well as numerous emotional trigger words, such as pro-choice, anti-woman...
So you can already see that...
which should exhibit an almost...
It's really good that he's doing this, because he's showing you how he made this video. This video is a piece of social engineering, to make you believe his narrative, not to shed light on the truth, but to propagandize his arbitrary beliefs because of his conservative viewpoint.
Automatic emotional response. Naturally, this post is also completely ridiculous, and intentionally so. The idea of ending your 6-month relationship over one mere disagreement is absolutely absurd, especially considering, as highlighted twice for good measure, everything else in the relationship is fine. Yet if I'm right, these details will simply be ignored, and they'll just eat it up anyway. Why? Because we're giving them the illusion of power, by playing into the fantasy that a member of a group they view as their enemy, which in this case is a Christian, could potentially be hurt, depending on their input. Alright, looking good. Let's check back tomorrow, and see if I'm right. 24 hours later. Alright, it's been a day. Let's see how it went. 582 notifications, 759 comments, 1,243 upvotes. 25 times the metrics of the average post.
Right? Only bringing up American politics. Yes, agreed. And he's not even American. It's really weird. It's almost like he's a propagandist.
Believable, as you may expect. Dump him. Yes, he is evil. OP, this sounds like the start of a potentially
Cherry picks the responses.
abusive relationship. What? Indeed, just as predicted, at least 99% of the responses were calling for the fictional relationship to end, with many acting as if the man being pro-life meant that he was the devil incarnate who had committed an unforgivable sin. This is coming from the same people.
Okay, but also, so if the guy is pro-life and you're pro-abortion, if y'all, fuck up and he gets pregnant, that's going to be a huge issue. That is a reason to not continue to date someone if they don't align on those beliefs of, whether it's your body, your choice. That is a reason to end a relationship or to not continue one. So he's trying to use that as though it's some bad thing. But this guy's such a sophist.
Refer to others as a clump of cells, I might add. An almost voluntary religious delusion.
When are we going to be done with this video?
And just as predicted, it was mostly men who were particularly engaged. Mostly.
Yes, you went on a website that is dominated by men. So you got your results that you were expecting. I don't get what the fucking point was of bringing that up.
Male, I can honestly and earnestly say that no man is qualified to pass judgment on the issue of abortion.
And see how he always gives the atheists a weird mocking accent instead of being unbiased and objective? That's because this guy isn't, and all he's trying to do, brainwash the people that watch his videos.
100% dump him if I was you. Would you stay with someone who didn't believe in a woman's right to choose? No, and I don't even have a uterus. Not sure about that one. As expected,
yeah,
the
agreed.
responses were universal, fanatical, and absurd. But we're not done yet.
Agreed to go quack, not what he's saying.
This post was read by just over 100,000 people. Now, 100,000 people is quite a lot, but I said we were going to reach the top of r/atheism. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do 10 times better than this. So let's fulfill their fantasy and give them exactly what they want.
What does this have to do with proving that atheism is a religion? He has never defined throughout the past 20 minutes of this video. It's been 19 minutes and 10 seconds. Throughout the past 19 minutes and 20 seconds, he has not defined what a religion is. He has not correlated how atheism is like a religion. All he has done is put a bunch of jumbled word salad together and then tried to mock atheists by putting together a bunch of straw men and knocking them down.
Christian boyfriend. Thank you,
and then going on r/atheism as though it has anything to do with whether it's a religion.
Do so. Yesterday,
because not all atheists are on r/Reddit. Not all people that actually give a shit on r/Reddit actually respond. And that doesn't also correlate to the beliefs of everyone. You're making so many inferences without any actual backing it up.
Asking people whether or not I should leave my Christian boyfriend, in spite of everything else being fine due to his anti-choice views. I expected to only get a handful of replies, but much to my surprise, there were over 700 responses. I read them all, and couldn't be any more grateful for all your thoughts.
None of this proves anything.
I've had a few people message me about what I decided to do, and the
except for that he's really good at manipulating and eliciting the responses he wants to get.
I realized
that's what he's doing. He's not proving anything. He's doing the opposite of science. He is working backwards. He sees a conclusion he wants, and then he's writing something that will elicit a response that gives him the conclusion that he wants. It's the complete opposite of finding the truth, bro. You're deluding your viewers.
It's the only option. And so, as tough as it was, as of today, my life is now Christian free. I know I'm just some random woman on the internet, and most of you probably don't care, but I just wanted to thank you all for giving me the strength to make this decision. I'm now looking forward to open up a fresh chapter of life, where I am now free to find a man who would respect me. An atheist man. Thank you all. What a ridiculous post. If I'm right, then this post will be the dream come true. It is both the fulfillment of one, a member of a group they perceive as their enemy getting hurt, while at the same time, two, giving them a sense of moral gratitude.
And right there. So what he's doing is not proving anything. All he is doing is social engineering, eliciting a response that he wants to get by putting in certain stimuli. That's not putting out certain stimuli and seeing what happens. That's working backwards, bro. You want to get these conclusions and you know how to get them, so you word things in a certain way to elicit the response that you get, so that way you can put it in your video and be like, hey, look, see, this proves that atheism is a religion, even though I haven't defined what a religion is. I haven't defined how those things correlate. But here, atheism is a religion because people get emotional and defensive online. Who would have thought that people argue online?
For it. So, yet again, let's see what happens.
I need to do more of these videos where I just play the video and just talk and just point out all the bullshit, because it's so easy for me and I don't see why. Because also another thing I've noticed is that a lot of times, like channels like this, if you put anything in the comments that responds to this, they delete it. If you put any good responses, all you'll see is positive stuff, because when they encounter something that actually challenges and disproves what they are trying to brainwash people with, it gets removed. They don't want it. They don't want people to know the truth. They want to form a certain form of idea in your mind.
Of course, just as expected, our post did in fact reach the top of r/atheism, with over 15,000 upvotes and hundreds of comments, almost all of which were, naturally, congratulating me on my bravery for making such a wise decision. Some people even found the post such a pleasure that they even paid real money to give it an award. Over 20 of them, in fact. So much so that I, the plus-size skeptic, now have ad-free Reddit Premium for the next 2 weeks. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Okay, so why was this so easy to pull off? Real free thinkers could never be so easily manipulated, because free thinkers are just that, free. They aren't predictable because their pragmatic nature...
First of all, anyone and everyone can be manipulated if you know how to manipulate people. It has nothing to do with whether you're a free thinker. Humans react to things pretty predictably most of the time. If you learn just some basic psychology, you can kind of get normal, you can get what you want most of the time by figuring out, how people are going to respond, once you get used to who they are, that, if I, give, Jim a beer, he'll, be in a better mood, and then when I ask for a raise later, he'll be fine, or something like that. I don't know. But it's just because you think of a free thinker as some weird ideal of qualities that you've put together doesn't mean that there even is this free thinker that you have defined or came up with, this imaginary ideal.
Prone to originality. But the religious, which these atheists, whether they know it or not, are of course very predictable, because their beliefs are set in stone. The truth is that atheists may have rejected the concept of God, but whether they realize it or not, they are hardwired to worship.
And he has never proved that once. He said there's just religions around the world. And you know what? Your ancestors were religious. Therefore, it's programmed into you. No scientific basis for that, no neurological basis, no actual biological basis. He just makes claims and never backs them up.
They won't worship him, then they will worship something else, whether a political ideology or, more often than not,
never defines what worship is either. Worship in a religious context is extreme reverence for a deity, usually in ritualistic form, that also is social, so that way it creates cohesion within the community. Religion is a lot more complicated than what this guy is claiming it to be. And every single time he's talked about religion, he puts it in a Christian context. There are there's still 7 billion people, right? Or did we get over to 8 billion yet? I don't know. I need to look that up at some point. I'll do that later. But we have billions of people on Earth. I think it's, 2 billion are Christian? Claim Christianity? Or 1 billion? But even then, There's a lot more people out there that are not Christian than are.
They
So
are
why
no
is he using
different to
Christianity
those
as
who
the
they
only
mock.
representation?
Granted, as opposed to being a lesson about atheism, this series of posts could also be a textbook example of why overly moderated online echo chambers are in fact a bad thing, as well as how fictional tales can...
Yes, the echo chamber that you are also trying to create and also fostering for your own audience. A conservative viewpoint that's if you look at the rest of his videos, you can pick it up. You'll see a trend through stuff. This guy is a propagandist for right wing ideology. You're creating your own right wing echo chamber in your comments and in your videos and in your community.
Online with great ease. But besides the point, r/atheism is a place that showcases beyond any reasonable doubt that even atheism, the very definition of rejecting religion, can actually...
No, it's not. Atheism is not the very definition of rejecting religion. It is a response to the claim, or it's not even a response to the claim of God. It's an absence of the belief in a God, in a supernatural being that created the universe. Atheism is not necessarily rejection of the supernatural either. He's never defined what atheism is. He hasn't talked about atheists in a truly global or definitive context. He hasn't. He set up a bunch of straw men with these weird personifications. What's the word I'm looking for? Like when he imitations of what he considers atheists online are like, and then he equates that to being all atheism or all atheists. It's not even atheism is not a thing. It's just a
of the average atheist by any stretch of the imagination. But even the
with representation, he is never, and he represents all atheists with this fedora hat. Yes, I understand that was a meme for like 2 years on the internet.
As in the non-Reddit using, non-fedora wearing respectable types, many of which may even be watching this production right now, are still, whether they know it or not, somewhat under the same religious dogma. Because as stated earlier, if one was to...
Dogma is a religious term talking about the core beliefs of religion, and if you don't adhere to the rules of that dogma, you are not in that religion. Atheism is merely an absence of the belief of God. That's not a religion. That is not a dogma. That's not saying that I believe in the Trinity and that Jesus was born of a Virgin Mary. The Virgin Mary. A baby was born of a virgin. But he has older brothers. Huh? How does that work? Anyways. It's interesting to see how people can just blatantly lie and manipulate to get their weird... This is propaganda. This is pure propaganda. It's trying to form in the public's mind a view of atheism when they haven't encountered atheism or atheists. They haven't read anything about why people don't believe in God, what the reasons are, and they're relatively scientifically illiterate. And then he's trying to get to them first, so that way when they do encounter someone that's an atheist, they already have a preformed idea in their mind. You're a bad person, and I need to convert you to my religion. Because you're still religious, even though that's... You can be an atheist and be religious. You can be an atheist and you can be not be religious. You can be a theist and not be religious. I'm a theist. I'm not religious. I don't do any rituals anymore. I don't go to church. Fuck, I don't even pray. Do I believe that there's a God? I think so. But my definition of what a God is nothing like this fool's.
The average atheist
sophist.
on their thoughts about numerous social issues, though they would certainly be less fanatical than their Reddit counterparts, the overall beliefs would probably be extremely similar.
Doesn't ever define... Well, first of all, atheism is the absence of a belief in God. So that's the only common factor. There is no beliefs. You don't have to have other things. I don't have to believe that Jesus was also born of a virgin and there is no God. I don't have to believe anything else. There is no, what's the word I'm looking for? Contingencies.
Falling somewhere within the socially progressive ballpark, being the antithesis of Christianity, without
Atheism has nothing to do with political ideology. There are people with certain political ideologies that have religious or non-religious tendencies. That has nothing to do with politics,
realizing
brother.
it. Not always, but mostly. And this is important. Why?
Because there are
unlike
authoritarian, right-wing atheists. They were in World War II in Germany. They used Christianity to first get in power and to manipulate the population. But the regime in World War II in Germany, I can't say their name because I'll just get banned on YouTube probably. They were an atheist movement to a degree. Some of them were hyper-religious, and some of them were pretty atheistic. But their own ideology of race was based on social Darwinism. And also influenced highly by Madame Blavatsky and the Theosophist. So there was cultic people that were in the Nazi movement, and there was ones that weren't so, cultic.
Or Islam, that promotes a disciplined and positive lifestyle that makes its followers prosper and happy. The modern atheist movement promotes carelessness and negative values.
Doesn't ever prove that or say why.
Makes its followers fickle and sad. You see, the atheist delusion is that all other religions, such as Christianity and Islam, are naught more than ancient historical artifacts that need to be destroyed.
Nope. To be an atheist, you don't have to believe any of that. There's a lot of atheists that actually think that religion is kind of good for some people. If it gives you some kind of happiness and, gives you a certain kind of regularity to your life, go for it. Atheism is not a proselytizing type of belief. You don't, or even absence of belief. I don't go around trying to tell everybody, hey, there is no God, and I'm not trying to prove it to you. That's what Christians do.
So that a new utopian age of facts and logic, without silly myths or superstition, can reign supreme, where we can conquer the stars and truly reach the next stage of the human story. But I have
Where does that come from?
For them. Religion is culture. It's not a coincidence.
No, it's not. Religion is not culture. It is a part of some cultures. Religion is not equated to culture. That's like saying all animals are dogs. No, dogs are animals. Not all animals are dogs. Super, super easy logical fallacy to point out right there. He doesn't even know which universal fits in within which, or what particular fits within what universal.
That Christianity and
Bad
Islam
logic
have
right there.
billions of inherents between them. On the contrary, the reason why such faiths have produced so many ardent followers throughout the generations, and will only continue to do so, is because regardless of whether or not they are accurate, such ancient religions understand the human condition
No, they don't.
better than any.
No, they don't. They are just merely claims that are passed down. A lot of times people are just kind of too lazy to really think. They're like, you know what? It's what everybody else kind of believes. I'll just go with it because it's the easier way to survive.
On an alternative. The biggest virtue of the ancient religions is their insistence that human beings, at our core, are just animals, and attempts to instill us with an unbending rule set to ascend us upwards to reach.
No, that is an assumption. Cites no sources. Not all religions believe that.
Maximum potential.
Not all ancient
Not as
religions,
animals,
especially.
but as something more. That is, after all, what morality is.
No, it's not.
Prioritizing and promoting traits that are hard for us to pull off, but ultimately make us prosper. Family, charity, humility, chastity, and much, much more. But without such values being enforced, but on the opposite.
Atheism is not the rejection of morals. That's anti-moralism. That's being an anti-moralist. You can still be an atheist and believe in ethics and morals. You ever heard of utilitarianism, dumbass?
Inverted, then of course the opposite will prove true. The people shall embrace animalism and become individualistic, selfish, prideful.
So if you look at actually some of the most atheistic countries, they actually are doing really well. And I think it's hilarious. The more religious centers of America, like the Deep South, they actually have lower IQ, and their states do worse academically, and they have lower income, and they just get screwed over by the rich a lot more.
Lustful, and much, much more. Just as
Because they get to believe in heaven. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to be a slave to your corporate master and believe that, well, one day I'm going to get rewarded in heaven, and be okay with not ever getting anything, getting your proper worth on earth, than it is to cope and realize that, you know what, I'm being screwed over. People don't want to think about that, because then what do? How do I get out of it? Religion gives you an option of, you know what, all your suffering here on earth, that's just going to make it better for you when you die. No, it's not. Once you're dead, you're dead. Nothing on earth is going to make your afterlife any better. If you do good because you are thinking that you're going to get something after this, you're not doing it for the goodness of it. You're doing it for selfish reasons. Do good things for their own sake, and for the goodness that it spreads to other people, for the help that it does to people. Do it because you love people, not because you think you're going to get rewarded.
And said society will perish under the weight of its own selfishness. Back when I was a teenager in the early 20s.
I actually know a lot of atheists that aren't even that selfish. I know that's an anecdote, but
I went through a bit of an edgy atheist phase myself. And I remember I really used to look up to these guys, who were known as the Four Horsemen of Atheism. But now, when I look back at some of the stunts these guys used to pull, it just makes me cringe beyond comprehension. I mean, he is Richard.
Why? Because you sold your soul?
One of the world's most fervent atheists, in front of a buzz that says there's probably no God.
And also, I'm not a big fan of Dawkins, because I feel like he's a good biologist, shitty philosopher.
Now stop worrying.
The God delusion is full of problems.
I mean, what kind of advice is that? And then we wonder why fatherlessness, drug use, alcoholism, adultery, prostitution, and corruption have all skyrocketed across the Western world.
What does that have to do with atheism? Yeah, as we said before, atheism is not the absence of morals. It's not it. Just because you don't believe in a God doesn't mean you don't have morals or don't believe in morals or ethics.
Last few decades must just be a coincidence.
And actually, a lot of violent crimes are committed by people that believe in God. A lot of crime is committed by people that are religious.
No, it's not a coincidence.
Religious violence on other religions is that's going on right now in the Middle East.
You killed that. Big mistake. So you had a bad experience with religion via overly evangelical parents? Big deal. That doesn't mean you should throw out all of the order and virtue that religion provides.
What order, what virtue? Never talked about what religion is. Never talked about how it's any virtuous.
Of beauty. A society that has a strong religious set of universal blanket beliefs that keeps its people virtuous and in order, while at the same time also maintaining the freedom for science to bloom and prosper. This logic will of course be common sense in the future, but sadly the future is not the present. First, we must witness the atheist mistake spread its corruption, whereby just like past utopian ideologies, harsh lessons for humanity await. Atheists will slowly learn in the coming decades that the futuristic, enlightened utopia that they were certain would be is naught more than a fiction.
You know who also believed in a fiction utopia? A lot of religion. Oh my God! It's literally the whole point of religion is the future coming utopia that never has come, and it has actually been made. This world has been made worse by adherence to religion, blind adherence. I think religion can be really good if you do it properly.
Craft will instead be a hell. They will celebrate illusionary victories in the short term, but in the long term, they will be overtaken and defeated. In America, such liberators shall of course be the Christians, but in Europe,
he paints Christians as liberators.
Shall in fact be Muslims. Laugh now as you may. Ultimately, however, this atheist phase, alongside its consequences, shall be remembered throughout history, not
you know who's done the most wars?
But a tragic war.
Religious people. There's literally fights over religious homelands right now.
If
People
you
are
really
dying because
can't
of
bring
this.
yourself to believe in God, then that's fine. Be an agnostic. Just don't be an atheist.
Because it's easier for him to convert you in his echo chamber that he has, if he can at least get you over to the line of agnostic.
The world is about to go to poo-poo. Alright folks, I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got the point that I was trying to make here, because I know that this one is a little
Oh, I
bit,
got the point I was trying to make.
with.
But anyways, finally that video's done. It's been an hour. And I hope y'all can see the problems with his arguments. The fact that he's never brought up any proof in this video. He never defined what a religion is. He never talked about how atheism correlates to religion. He just made a bunch of statements, never backed them up, and linked his unbacked up statements together and said, see, atheism is a religion because of abortion, because of this Reddit post. Atheism is a religion because of these things. No, he is really good at social engineering. This guy is a bit of a spider. So, yeah, Alex, Hexagon, fuck you. I hope you see this video. Peace.